So we'll discuss tonight a little bit about the mitzvah of Hadlakas Nairos, lighting the candles. As we're going to be reading about in Parashas Tetzaveh, we'll be reading about Hadlakas Nair, the lighting of the candles in the Beis HaMikdash. And that's a discussion in terms of what exactly is the mitzvah. Is the mitzvah the actual Ma'isa Hadlaka, the act of lighting? Or is it the fact that you have the candles were lit in the fire was lit in the Beis HaMikdash? But we'll focus our attention more on something more halacha l'maisa, like our Friday night mitzvah of Hadlakas Nairos Shabbos. So the Gemara in Shabbos tells us what is the nature of the mitzvah of Hadlakas Nair. But before that, we need a little introduction. The Rambam, when he talks about the different mitzvahs of Shabbos, so he connects the mitzvah of Zachar and Shamar, so the mitzvah of Zachar making Kiddush and doing all the mitzvahs Hayom, Shalosh Shudas, Lecha Mishnah, and the mitzvah of Shamar keeping Shabbos. And then in mitzvahs Midivrei Kabbalah from Yeshaya, from the prophets, he talks about the mitzvah of Kavod and Oneg Shabbos. And we always hear Kavod Shabbos, Oneg Shabbos. There's the famous Vilna Gaon. What is the difference between Kavod Shabbos or Oneg Shabbos? That the Vilna Gaon writes, the basic difference is Kavod is everything you do before Shabbos. All the shopping you do, getting the food ready, the barbecuing, setting the table, getting the house clean, that's Kavod Shabbos. And everything you get benefit on Shabbos, that's Oneg Shabbos. And so we'll see where Hadlakas Nairos fits in. Is it part of the mitzvah of Kavod Shabbos? Is it Oneg Shabbos? Is it both? We'll have to see it. So the Gemara in Shabbos tells us in the second parak. The Gemara has a whole long discussion in the second parak about which type of wicks could you use, what type of oil, because the Gemara talks about, the Mishnah talks about, you shouldn't use oil that smells bad, because the whole purpose is you want people to get benefit from the lights on Shabbos. So if you light smelly oil, just like if you have a bad smell in your house, what are people going to do? They're going to leave the house or leave the room. So therefore the Gemara goes into the different types of appropriate oils and wicks that are good, which are preferable, which are no good, etc. So when the Gemara goes on onto its topic of Hanukkah, because it goes right into Hanukkah because of candles, and then the Gemara tells us that one of the purposes of Ner Shabbos, the purposes of lighting Shabbos candles, is what was famously known as Shalom Bayis, peace of household, taken literally, but it means to live in harmony and peace at home. And that's not just a nice, sermon to give on, but it's a real halachic, as I'll show you, it's a real halachic concept that comes up many times in halacha, that for Shabbos, that the purpose of lighting the Shabbos candles is to create harmony. As Rashi writes, there's nothing worse. We all know about it. First of all, when we're during this period of sad, as it's known, seasonal adjustment disorder, that's a time period now where it gets dark. You go to work, it's dark, assuming you go to work. But if you go to work, it's dark. You come back, it's dark. It's snowy, rainy. The winter's not in terms of that. It's a much more depressing time for many people. And that's why, and psychologists even have a time period, because there's something about light that brings joy. And Judaism was well aware of that well before they came up with sad. And that's why, what do you think of the Yontif of Hanukkah in the dead of the winter? In the dead of the winter, we know we all need a ruchnius recharge, a spiritual recharge. You have the lights of the candles, and light brings joy. They try to get, and if that doesn't work, we have a Tu B'Shvat, getting ready for the New Year for trees in the middle of the winter, because even though we might not see it, but the sap that's inside the tree is starting to grow, and the fruits are growing, and it is really the time of rebirth. So everyone gets down when it's dark, and it's more likely to be down when we know there's nothing like a nice sunny day. Vayashkem Avram Baboka, getting up bright and sunny. But so we know life deals us both sunny days and rainy days. So part of the mitzvah of Friday night, keep in mind, we're spoiled today. We don't realize we don't understand what it means to be in the dark. We're never really in the dark. But before electricity, it wasn't like these are extra lights. Without these lights, you're walking in the dark. And part of enjoying a Shabbos with your family is you need some light. There's nothing worse, the Rashi tells us, and we know firsthand, if you're walking in the dark, you stub your toe. And then what's what they call misplaced aggression. You take it out on everyone else at the table. You're upset, you're screaming at the kids, at your wife or whoever, they're screaming at you. It's some type of harmony which light brings, and a type of serenity, Shabbat Shalom. It's all about Shalom Bayis. And that's even though today it's just Tosefes, or we have electricity, but the main point is light. In fact, Rav Selevan pointed out, because of this reason, well, one should do what every woman should do before they light the Shabbos candles is they should go and shut off all the lights in the house and turn them on. Whatever lights you're going to leave on in your house for Shabbos, turn them on l'shem Shabbos, and then go light the candle, and then make the bracha. Your bracha should go on everything, because really today the main light is the electricity and not the candle. The candle, there is an issue of a candle. It causes, some say, it's a nice atmosphere, you have a candlelight dinner, but in terms of the light, the main light we have today isn't usually from the candle, but nevertheless, we should try to have the light near where we're eating in the room, because you're supposed to get some benefit from the light. And even though today we assume that you can fulfill actually your mitzvah of Friday night candles with electric. Let's say, for instance, you're home alone and you're going to be leaving the house, or you're going out for dinner Friday night and you don't want to leave the candles around. Or let's say when my wife goes away and I light candles, I don't like leaving candles alone, so I light candles on the electric. I make and the majority of poskim, except Rav Moshe, also you can make a bracha as well on electric light. Let me just point out the different types of electric. There's the incandescent bulbs, and there's the fluorescent, the LED. When I talk about electric in terms of fire, it only works in terms of the incandescent bulb. That's a burning filament, so that's similar to fire. But fluorescent and LED, that's not real fire in terms of. So, in other words, you can't fulfill your biblical mitzvah of fire using those lights, because al pi halacha, they're not considered light. Rabbinically, we say, so for instance, I always give a trivia question, because today now many people have fluorescent lights. They save money, that probably doesn't get the house so hot. So what's better, to have your house, if you had a choice, putting the green aspect aside, al pi halacha, is it better to have just electric, like incandescent bulbs in your house, or fluorescent or LED? So it all depends. There are pros and cons in each way. So in terms of desecrating the Shabbos, you're better off having all fluorescent lights in your house, because fluorescent lights, according to many, are only a rabbinical prohibition, and therefore, and a lot of times we're talking about closing lights by mistake. You don't think, you're shutting it off. And a rabbinical prohibition, b'shogeg, you don't even need atonement, because what's the whole prohibition of why do you have to listen? Why do you do the mitzvahs drabanan? Because you're listening to the rabbis, and by not doing it, you're rebelling against the rabbis. So doing something unintentional, I'm not rebelling. So therefore, you don't even need atonement. If you accidentally shut off your fluorescent light on Shabbos, I'm not recommending it, but you wouldn't even need kapara. You wouldn't even need atonement, according to many. So in terms of violation, fluorescents are the way to go. However, in terms of mitzvahs aseh, in terms of positive mitzvahs, you would need an incandescent bulb. So for instance, making havdalah over light. In fact, Rav Chaim Ozer Grzinski, one of the big poskim, he was the Rav Moshe of Europe. He was the big posek in Europe, and when electricity came out, there's a lot of confusion. There still might be a lot of confusion, but there's certainly a lot more confusion 100 years ago and more about how it works. And people were turning on lights on Shabbos because they thought electricity was okay, or they didn't think it was. And Rav Chaim Grzinski was very strong against it, so what he did was he specifically made Havdalah over an incandescent bulb to show you can't use this on Shabbos. I mean, you can use it if it's on before. You can't turn it on because this has a biblical din of Aish. And therefore, he was very strong on doing it to teach people that you can't turn on lights on Shabbos. So those are in terms of mitzvahs asa, you need a real fire, you need an incandescent bulb. But in terms of violations, if you only have fluorescent lights, you can't violate Shabbos on a biblical level, even if a person turns on lights on and off all day. So getting back, so the mitzvah today is mostly with the electric. That's why Rav Selevan and others say the bracha should go on the electric. In fact, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, one of the great rabbis of of our generation, so he used to tell his wife when they went to the hotel for a good convention or wherever they went for, the meaning the woman liked lighting with fire because that's what they used to. So he used to tell her, you know what, go turn on the light in the hotel room, whether it's the bathroom light or somewhere else, and then go down. If you want, go light you can make your bracha on your candles downstairs. But the main light is, but have in mind, it's going on the whole room. But again, since today we have electric, so we don't really appreciate the deepness of the Chazal's takana, making sure to have lights on Shabbos. People used to live in darkness, and to ensure you have lights and enjoy a nice Shabbos meal together in harmony, there's nothing like that. And we see it's not just a sermon, Shalom Bayis, but it's a real halachic principle. In fact, it comes up in the Gemara where we're just discussing. It's not a 21st century question, but the principles still apply. The Gemara wants to know if someone is afflicted with poverty and you only have enough money to either buy candles for Shabbos, candles for Hanukkah, or wine for Kiddush. That's your choice. Door number 1, candles for Shabbos. Door number 2, candles for Hanukkah. Door number 3, wine for Kiddush. So the Gemara says, Pshita. It's obvious. What kind of question is that? It's obvious what number 1 is. You could talk about 2 and 3, but it's obvious Shabbos candles comes first, Mishum Shalom Bayis. There's nothing greater than the principle of Shalom Bayis, and therefore that takes precedence over the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, and that takes precedence over the mitzvah of wine for Kiddush. And what about in terms of Ner Chanukah versus wine for Kiddush? The Gemara says it's a good question. There's 2 conflicting values, as always. You have the value on one hand, the Chanukah has Pirsume Nisa, publicizing the miracle. You have the value of wine for Kiddush, that we have a principle, Tadir V'Sha'eno Tadir Kodim. You have a choice in front of you. You have a mitzvah, you have 2 mitzvahs to do, and you're going to do them both. The question is, which one do you do first? So the Gemara says, the one which is more frequent takes precedence over the one that's infrequent. We live in Western society where things that happen once in a while, those are the important things, like the Super Bowl. But a Shabbos, which comes every week, and that's the holiest day of the year, and we have it every week. And we say sometimes being frequent takes precedence, and in fact we do it every morning. We put on the talis first, and then we put on tefillin. Because talis we wear every day of the year. Tefillin we only wear most of the days of the year, and therefore we put on our talis first, and then we put on our tefillin. So which one? So Kiddush happens more often than Chanukah. So on one hand, Kiddush is more frequent, but Chanukah has Pirsume Nisa. So the Gemara concludes, Pirsume Nisa Adef. Publicizing the miracle takes precedence, and hence the order is door number 1, Shabbos candles, because of Shalom Bayis. Door number 2, Chanukah, because of publicizing the miracle. And wine for Kiddush, door number 3. Let me just point out that, but Chanukah is clearly only a rabbinical mitzvah. That's a given. It's post-biblical. And near Chanukah also, near Shabbos also, is probably only a rabbinical. Some bring down maybe one sheet is daraisa, maybe halacha Moshe Misinai, but we assume it's basically midivrei Nevi'im. It's only rabbinical. But Kiddush, we know, Zachar Shom Shabbos L'Kadsha, that's biblical. So what do you mean? How could Kiddush, which is biblical, be in last place? And of course, you know from the shir I gave a couple of weeks ago that we pass in like the Rambam, that the only part of Kiddush which is biblical is the actual saying of the words. When you say the Kiddush, that's biblical. Over the wine is only rabbinical. So we're dealing with all rabbinical mitzvahs. So, but we see that it's not just a drasha. Shalom Bayis beats out the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. It beats out the mitzvah of Kiddush, wine for Kiddush on Friday night. And this parenthetically, Tosfos asked the question, our minhag seems to go against this because we didn't have it this year, but when Shabbos falls out, when Chanukah and Rosh Chodesh, which does fall out on Shabbos this week, but if you have Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Shabbos, which can happen on Shabbos, so you have to take out 3 Sifrei Torah. So the Shulchan Aruch brings down what is the order. So obviously Parshat Shuvah goes first. Then what second is Rosh Chodesh, and third is Chanukah. So Tosfos asks, that's against what we just said in the Gemara, because Rosh Chodesh is Tadir, it happens 12 times a year. Chanukah only happens 8 times a year. So really we should read, so we said Persume Nisa, we said publicizing the miracle beats out Tadir. So it should really be first Chanukah, then Rosh Chodesh. Like we said in the Gemara, the order is Shabbos candles, Chanukah candles, and then Friday night candles, because publicizing the miracle beats out frequency. So how come then when we read on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, we do Rosh Chodesh and then we do Chanukah? It seems to be against the Gemara. The answer is no. So Tosfos explains that, no, when do we say Tadir, frequency wins? That's only if it's a sequence. I have 2 mitzvahs in front of me, so I'm doing both. The question is, what is the order? Then we kick in the principle of Tadir v'sheino Tadir. And therefore, I'm waiting. I have a Sefer Torah. I'm waiting all 3. Okay, so then we go with Tadir. But when did we go with Persume Nisa Adef? That's only if it's either or. I have to make a decision here. I only have enough money to buy one, then publicize the miracle wins. But if not, if you're doing both, the question is, what is the order? So then Tadir wins. Just like the halacha is, let's say it's Rosh Chodesh, it's Shabbos, for whatever reason, you're at the Kiddush club, you came back and you missed Musaf, and you forgot to daven Musaf until later, and it's Mincha time, and you realize you didn't daven Musaf yet. So what do you daven first, Musaf or Mincha? So the halacha is, you daven Mincha before Musaf, because Mincha is Tadir, Mincha is every day, Musaf is only once in a while, with one caveat. The Rambam points out, if you're davening b'tzibur, if the whole community missed Musaf, if you're davening b'tzibur, then you never switch the order, because it'll cause too much confusion. We go with the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid, when we're dealing with the tzibur, and therefore, what are they going to say? Wait a second. Last week we davened mincha before Musaf, and today I'm davening Musaf at 10 a.m., so maybe I could daven mincha also, and whatever, you'll be surprised with whatever they come up with, but the wrong message will get out there. And therefore, if we're dealing with the tzibur, we keep it simple. But if you're davening by yourself or at home, you would daven mincha first because it's tadir. Where else do we find the concept of shalom bayis? We find it of all places, as I spoke about last week in Milton about the ethics of divorce. So there are different. So the Gemara has conflicting messages about divorce. On one hand, the Gemara says, Mizbeach Morid Mos, that the altar cries, the tears when a couple gets divorced, the Mizbeach, the altar in the temple cries. It's a terrible thing. On the other hand, we have a Gemara which calls it Shalom Bayis. When you get a divorce, you couldn't live together, it's just untenable, you're fighting all the time, you're messing everyone up, so sometimes it is so. Again, you have to know, certain times it's Shalom Bayis, other times it's not. The trick is to know when it is and when it's not. But so the Gemara over there, when it talks about the question of a sota, a woman suspected of adultery. So we know during the time in the temple, she used to drink from the mei sota. There was a certain drink. Again, there's a whole process. She was accused, and of course it has to be a case where the Gemara, the Rambam point out, obviously, it can't be the husband's also living a life of a playboy. He's hanging out with all the women and he's accusing his wife. It doesn't work that way. It's only going to work if the husband is living an ethical life himself, and he accuses the wife, witnesses and etc. So in order to keep the marriage going, so she has to drink the mei sota. So the Gemara says, so what do you do in this drink? So in this drink, you know what you do? You mix some water, earth, and you do mechikas Hashem. You destroy God's name. You take a cloth with God's name on it, and you mix it in, and God's name gets destroyed. So the Gemara says we see how great Hachavev to God is Shalom Bayis. He's willing to have his name destroyed for the sake of keeping a couple together. To keep a Yiddish family together, he has no problem with Mechikas Hashem. And really, the pshat is it's not really Mechikas Hashem, it's not really destroying God's name, because the Tshuvas HaRamah points out, that really, what is the source of destroying God's name? It talks about how you're supposed to mavazeh avodah zarah, you're supposed to be down on it, and lo sasun kain, but don't treat God this way. So when do we say mechikas Hashem is a violation if it's destructive? But if it's constructive, like saving a marriage, so therefore it's not like you're doing an avera, it's a mitzvah in that case. So in fact, it's a famous ma'aseh was of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He was one of the great Rabbanim of Yerushalayim, and he was known for his Shalom Bayis. In fact, they say over that when he was speaking at the minig of Yerushalayim is that when you're giving a eulogy, you ask mechila from your husband, your wife, whoever you're talking about. So he got up and said, I know the minig is to ask mechila, but I have nothing to ask mechila for. I know I never caused her any harm. I don't know if we should get chizuk from that or be depressed from that. But either way, that's how Rav Shlomo Zalman was. So the point was, so they say a story, one day he was walking home from shul, and his students were walking him home, and he was about to enter his house, and he started fixing his tie, his hat. So the student said to him, what are you doing, Rebbe? Are you expecting guests at home? Why are you fixing up your shirt and tie? So he says, yeah, I am expecting guests. Of course I am. Because Chazal tell us, our rabbis tell us, that when there's peace in the home, Hashchina Shorbo, the divine presence comes down and visits. So I'm expecting God to be there. However, when there's fighting in the house, Machlokes, that sends God running out of the house. That's Mechikas Hashem. When there's no Shalom Bayis, when you're fighting at home, that's destroying God's name. And that's what they point out. That was, they have many stories about Rav Shlomo Zalman in terms of he was very meticulous in his mechikas, in his mitzvah of Shalom Bayis. So we see there are many. So getting back and summarizing, we're just beginning to discuss, that is, the part of the mitzvah of Hadlakas Nairos, and of course Hadlakas Nairos in the Beis HaMikdash. Whether the mitzvah was the actual lighting or having light in your house, and we basically focus on the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos and the opinion that of Shalom Bayis. We'll have to continue another time with whether it's covet or owning. Maybe we'll discuss it on Shabbos. By getting back to Shalom Bayis, we pointed out that the importance of having light in your house, and it was a day when it was dark, and there's nothing worse than walking around, stubbing your toe and walking around and being upset and stubborn and all that, because we have a moral obligation to be happy, because there's nothing worse than hanging around with people who are depressed and upset all the time, because it's not only for them, but no one wants to be around those people, and especially on a Shabbos, a Shalom Bayis, we want to have a nice Shabbos meal with Barki and company by the Shabbos candles, and we see it's not just a drasha. We see the Gemara brings it down takes precedence over Chanukah candles, over wine for Kiddush. We're even willing to do Mechikas Hashem when it comes to bringing back a marriage, Shalom Bayis. And to conclude, that's why I think it's the Arizal or the Zohar. We're going to read in a couple of weeks. There's a special prohibition on Shabbos. Will Sevaru Eish B'chol Moshvo Sechem. Literally means you can't kindle a fire on Shabbos, as we discussed. But the Arizal, the Zohar say, no, Eish Eishel Machlokes. Of course, they're all year round to fight with one another every day, but there's a special prohibition on Shabbos. The fire of Machlokes, one has to stay away all week long, but especially you violate a separate law on Shabbos. It's all about Shabbat Shalom, and that's what it's all about. The mitzvah Hadlakas Nairos, it's about the Indian of Shalom Bayis.